Hello, welcome to another episode of the CPA Marketing Genius podcast. I have a super guest. His name is Roy Osing. I'm going to quickly read his bio. Before I do that, Roy, welcome, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your audience.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. Folks, Roy describes himself as an audacious leader, a storyteller, practical, proven, unheard of ways. Been there, done that career, frontline, lover, trenches, not textbooks. He's got a bio that speaks volumes. Roy is a former president, chief marketing officer, and entrepreneur with over 40 years of successful and unmatched executive leadership experience in every aspect of business. As president of a major data and internet company's leadership in audacious, unheard of ways took the company from the early stage to $1 billion in annual sales. He's devoted to inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, organizations to stand apart from the average, boring crowd and achieve their true potential. So, Roy, let me start off by asking you, what's the idea behind your be different or be dead work?
Yeah, so my experience and observation over a long time has been that, and it was this case in the very beginning, is that I discovered that success is a function of being different. It's not a function of being the same. And so if you look at successful people, if you look at successful organizations, they figured out how to kind of separate them. So the notion of differentiation, okay, is extremely important. And so I learned and applied the concept to not just business and my career, but also to my life, etc. So I'm driven by this notion of be different or be dead. And some people will ask me, well, what about the or be dead piece? And I'm saying, well, yeah, I know it's kind of dramatic, but the reality is, if you're not different, nobody will buy from you. And sooner or later, you will die as an organization. That's just the way it is. And so you look around the landscape these days and in the past, why do companies go bankrupt? Most of them go bankrupt because they're irrelevant to their customers. And irrelevancy is a function of not being different. Irrelevancy is a function of being the same as everyone else and not giving people a good reason why they should buy from you. Okay, and so that's the key. It's driven my life, it's driven my work, it's driven my career. And now this is I've just published my 7th book. As you mentioned in your intro, Be Different or Be Dead, the audacious, unheard of ways I took a startup to $1 billion in sales. And so I hope to get more people's attention, Salim. I just do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I totally resonate with the concept of be different or be dead. Take us to when you were in corporate America, building an organization that did $1 billion in sales. I'm curious to know, what are some of the audacious things that you did? And just give us one or two or three, that took your organization to the levels that it did.
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, I had to create my own planning process. The pedantic way that we're taught to create strategic plans didn't work for me for one simple reason, that most of them aren't built to execute. They're built to formulate this notion of pristineness and perfection in terms of a strategy. And they spend way too much time on that as opposed to figuring out how you're going to execute it. Generating revenue, folks, is not about the efficacy of the plan, right? It's about getting stuff done. And so I had to create my own process called a strategic game planning process. And people can check that out on my website. I've written all sorts of blogs about it. And in a nutshell, it's basically built around answering 3 questions. How big do you want to be, which is a statement of top line revenue growth? Who do you want to serve, which is a statement about which customers are you going to select to generate the revenue? And the third question is, how are you going to compete and win? And that's the differentiation piece. And within that as well, and I'll just give you one more example, I created my only way to differentiate, and it's called the only statement. And it goes like this: we are the only ones we are the only ones that do something that's compelling and relevant to people that you've chosen to serve. And the reason I went there is that the world today is, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm worried about it. I mean, you can open any website or anything and examine how people claim that they have an advantage in the market. And generally speaking, you will see claptrap, what I call claptrap. Claptrap expressions like, we're better, we're the best, we're number one, we're the market leader. Those are narcissistic terms because they represent what you think you are, not what your customers think you are. Plus, quite frankly, they can't be proven in any event. Okay, so I mean, those two things really help me because they help me launch the business. Planning should be built to execute, and you need to be the only ones that do what you do. If you can get those two pieces right, then of course there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we did along the way, but those were the anchors. And look at, I'm talking to your audience. If you don't have a strategic game plan that's built to execute, if you don't have a way to create uniqueness relative to your competition, you're going to have a hard time. Okay. And I can help.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to unpack what you just shared. Your strategic game plan, there were three components of it, if I understood correctly. And I believe the first one was, where do you want to go, or how big you want to get?
How big do you want to be?
How big do you want to be? So is that from a revenue standpoint and a number of clients that you want to serve? Are you kind of taking us from a top line standpoint?
Yeah, it's totally top line. It doesn't involve anything else in the income statement. I mean, I can give you an EBITDA or a net income by playing with the financials in the income statement, but you can't hide from top line because top line revenue is an expression of how the market feels about you. Okay. It tells you how well you're doing in the market in terms of serving the people that you've chosen. And so we start out with that. And let me give you an example. Let's say you're doing 10 million a year. Okay. What I will do is I will challenge you to declare how big you want to be in 24 months, not 5 years, because I hate 5-year plans. 5-year plans, the fourth year never shows up, Salim. It never does, right? And it just gives people an excuse to put things off for a while. So I keep this time horizon 24 months. So if you're at 10 million, I will challenge you in terms of how big do you want to be in 24 months? Do you want to be 20 million? Do you want to be 15 million? Do you want to be 100 million? Depending on the number that's chosen, it declares and drives the character and the risk profile of your strategy. You with me? So basically, most planning processes, they do the plan and then they figure out what the financials are. No, that's the wrong way about it. Okay, because generally what you do is you don't like the numbers and you change the assumptions without changing the strategy. So I figured out really early, you declare your goal and then you decide how you're going to get there. Now, a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, that's really complicated. You may come up with an audacious, unrealistic goal. And I said, well, of course, that's the point. Do you really think you're going to have any motivation to innovate and do things differently if you know how to achieve the number? The whole point here is to create an I don't know. I don't know is the genesis, is the driver in my world of innovation and creativity, because you got to figure it out. Okay, so for me, I'm always pushing people to pick a big number. If it's a small number, whatever. I mean, it's a walk in the park. And if you really want to be creative and different and stand out, you have to have an audacious goal. So yes, it's top line. It's based on I don't know, because that's going to drive creativity.
Got it. So you're talking to a practice owner, owns an accounting firm, 4 employees. Let's say they're doing 500K.
Yep.
Now, how much thought do they need to give to like the top line? How scientific do they need to get? Is it 1 million in 24 months, or is it 2 million or 3 million? Yeah. Because a lot of people can get stuck and confused about and never take any action and never go beyond that.
Well, therein lies the beauty of the strategic game planning approach, because it's more about what you want. It's less about trend lines. It's less about extrapolating the past. If you're at 500,000, my question to you is, Salim, okay, in 24 months, where do you want to be? Okay, and if you say, well, it depends on blah, 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 I say, no, it doesn't. Tell me do you want to have $1 million? Do you want to have $2 million? You need to drive a stake in the ground, because that's going to determine the essence of your strategy. Okay,
Mm.
put the books aside, and I want to talk to you. What do you want to do with your business over the next 24 months? I'm dealing with a client right now out of Montreal, Quebec, and he's doing about 6 million a year. And we're going to do this strategic game planning process in 2 days. And that's the other thing. It's wonderfully simple, and it's team building. People have a great time. He wants to be 25 and 25. He wants to do 25 million in 2025. So he's pushed the envelope out to 36 months. So I let him get away with that. But it's still, relative to 5 and 10 years, it's close in. So how did he come up with the 25? It's in his heart. That's how he came up with the 25. And he understands that it's it's quadrupling revenue. You're not going to get there by doing the same things, Salim. You're going to get there by innovating and creating new things. You're not going to get there by benchmarking best of class, because if you can pull this off, you will be the best in class. And so that's the point. Let's not, to your audience, guys, let's not complicate that. My question is, at the end of the day, if you're at 500K in 24 months, where do you want to be? Where do you intend to be? And let's use that energy to develop your strategy and how to get there.
Got it. So some self-reflection there and saying, do I want to be at 1 million? No, not big enough. No, 2 million would be exciting. I think 2 million, Roy. And is that kind of the process? And all right, 2 million it is. Let's go. Let's now put the plan together.
Now, how complicated is that? So I get the people looking in on this going, what? I've never seen that in any textbook. And I said, yes, you have. Okay, let me show you the textbook it's in. It's called Be Different or Be Dead. How I took a startup to $1 billion. That's the textbook. It's a new way of thinking about strategy building. And it's a new way of thinking about revenue growth. And if you want later on, it's got this huge hook into scaling. We talked a little bit about this in our last conversation, how to scale a business. This has got amazing, and your clients out there, they need to think about how to scale a small business. It's exceedingly important. And there's all sorts of ways of doing that within the process that I've had to create to survive. I never would have been successful had I not broke away from pedantic strategic planning and created my own approach. I never would have been able to get the billion ever.
Yeah. This is great. So unpacking the strategic plan, top line, that's, being focusing on that. Practice owner, practitioner doing 500,000. All right, I want to be at 2 million. In 24 months, I'd love to be at 2 million, or kind of just using, an illustration. What's the second piece? Again,
so the second question,
you shared it, but yeah, let's unpack it.
Yeah, we'll unpack it a bit more. So, okay, let's suppose you want to go from 500,000 to 2 million. The next question is, where are you going to get to 2 million? Okay, so this is the process of determining what I call, who do you want to serve? These are the customer groups that have the latent potential to get you to the how big, to get you, in this case, in this example, to the 2 million. Okay. So we do a lot of work here because it's not about mass marketing. It's about selecting specific customer groups that have certain growth characteristics. And it's also about minimizing the number of groups that you have. Like one of the things that I do is I have fun with people and say, okay, you want to get an extra 1.5 million. Let's find one customer. Let's find one customer that will get you the extra 1.5 million. Can you do that for me? And they go, of course, well, I don't know. I said, okay, how much do you know about your customers? All right, so let's get serious here, because this requires granularity of thought and understanding about your customer groups. Now, of course, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get them from one customer. First of all, why do I even go there? Well, I go there because we're all short of resources. If we can get the revenue from one client, okay, I'm way better off than chasing myself and spreading myself too thin, right?
Yeah.
I also happen to know chances are we won't find one customer, but maybe two. Okay, maybe three. Okay, maybe four. So you see where I'm going here. So I get people to think through getting that 1.5 million from as few customers as possible in order to apply resources efficiently. And so we spend a lot of time on that. And eventually we answer the question, Who do you want to serve? And I test it and test it and test it and drill it and drill it. I do not let people get away with saying, well, we're going to go after the single family homeowners. No, that's way too broad. You'll never achieve anything if you have a broad target. And this is where the textbooks get a lot of people into trouble, because they talk about target marketing. It's not target marketing, folks. It's target customers. That's what it is. It's targeting customers, people that you can look eye to eye in, right, with, and determine how you're going to get them to transact with you, engage with you, and give you more money to get you to get you to 2 million. So that's a huge.
And so my version of what I teach CPAs is, going for high value clients. So the client avatar is a high value client that's paying $15,000 a year in fees. And to get to the 1.5 million, we're going to need about 100 clients, right? Exactly 100 clients. Actually, I usually use the 1 million. You need, 67 clients that are paying 15,000, and that gets us to the million. So, to get to the 1.5, we need 100 business clients, right? So we're in step 2 of your strategic plan, where we're getting granular. All right, how are we going to get to the 1.5? We started with 1 client at 1.5, and we know that's not going to happen, but we know that maybe we can do this with 100 business clients that are paying $15,000 a year. That's realistic for a CPA firm owner to do that. Work with a business owner, provide them a package of services that's going to help them the top line, the bottom line, minimize taxes, and so forth.
Yeah, I mean that's notionally very, very consistent. I don't get in at this point in the strategy building process. I don't get into the granularity, because what happens, we get there eventually once we get to break down and set objectives. That's where you break down the revenue target into clients by year, by month, et cetera, et cetera. At this stage, I want to know more about the nature, of the customer groups that they're going after. It's more about what is the nature of the business that has the potential to get you the 1.5, as opposed to we'll get to name them in a minute, right? Kind of thing. But at this stage of the process, it's like, okay, what kind of businesses? Where are they physically? Are they just around the corner? Like, one of the things that I advocate is fast and easy. If you want to get them 1.5 million in 24 months, you cannot have a selling cycle that's a year long, right? Because you've lost it. The run rate on revenue needs to get up real fast. So I advocate fast and easy. So when you look at who to serve, I say, well, where are they and how quickly can you get to them? Because I also advocate growing existing clients, as opposed necessarily to acquiring. Acquiring for me is a last effort, because it requires a lot of effort and referrals and blah, 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 blah. Show me your client base and show me the ones who've got the latent potential to grow more if you did the right thing. Let's work on them first. The residual will say, okay, we got to go acquire, because what I find is there's too much attention paid to acquisition and not enough attention paid to generating more revenue from the existing client base. And if you want to scale a business, you're not going to do it based on the backs of acquisition. You're just not, because the cost is way disproportionate to the revenue. But if you've got 100 clients and 50 of them are super loyalists, I want you to spend time with those loyalists first. How much can you get? How much more money can you get out of them? Because the cost stream looks completely different, and disproportionate revenues to cost means you're scaling your business. That's what it means, right? And for small firms, accounting firms, it's really important that you be able to scale. I always say, I'm not interested in growth. I'm interested in scaled growth, where revenues outpace cost. And you don't get there by acquiring, at least not in my experience. Yes, you end up having to do some of that, but to me, that's a residual activity. It's mine your existing customers first, and then let's see where we need to go and mirror image, and maybe get referrals from those strong existing customers before you go start spending a whole lot of money trying to acquire. But the problem is, everybody thinks acquisition is sexy. And so they give away television sets to get new clients and blah, 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 with the mistaken belief that if I give you a free TV to get your business, I actually believe you'll stay with me if somebody else offers you a bigger TV. How nonsensical is that? I know you're going to leave, right? And yet we keep doing it. So focus on your existing clients. Figure out which ones have got the best potential. Let's work with them first. Then you earn the right to acquire new ones. But we're not going to start there. And this is an interesting conversation because people don't like to do that. Retention is not something that is sexy, Salim. It's not, right? It's hard work because you really have to know, right, your client. The other thing about it is acquisition generally results in you flogging your wares. Now, we talked about product flogging in our first session. Disgusting habit. You're there to create value for your clients, not flog your products. Well, if you go in the acquisition mode, I guarantee you what you will do, because I see it, you will flog your accounting products. Don't do it. Well, you need to get value for people. Don't flog products at them. And so, long-winded way of saying, I drive to loyalty. I drive to existing customers to try and, I mean, nirvana for me is a situation where you actually can satisfy your how big with your existing client base. That's nirvana. It doesn't happen all the time. In fact, rarely, but the discipline, right, forces you to pay attention to that core group of people that have been loyal to you. And that's, I think, the route to success.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So two things we've talked about in terms of the strategic plan, 2 out of 3 things, right? The top line and then how you're going to get there. What's number 3?
So the third question is all about, while you're in a competitive world, right? So you got other firms competing with you. The question is, how are you going to compete and win? So this is all about your competitive differentiation strategy. And as I said to you earlier, one of the things I discovered and created was this only statement. And so the answer to that question really is to create for a client what their only statement is. We're the only ones that, not we're better, not we've been in business longer, not, we're the leader, none of that. It's we're the only ones who. So this is a really tough exercise because it requires that you understand at a very, very granular level what your who, now that we've decided, or let's call them targets, what your targets not need, what they crave. Because people buy on feelings. They don't buy on needs anymore because everybody can satisfy needs. So what I learned is if you can figure out what people feel about what they crave, then generally speaking, first of all, they're going to pay you more money. You're going to get premium pricing out of craving satisfaction.
Love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And second, there's fewer people competing in that space. And so what we do is I have a process to go through to create the only statement. And it's driven by how intimately do you really understand the who that we just decided to serve? And it drills down and down and down to the point where we get a nucleus of cravings. And then we match them with the strengths of the organization. And then we draft up an only statement that says we are the only ones who. Now, some of your clients out there may remember the Grateful Dead. The Grateful Dead happened to be the most successful touring rock band in history. It's not the Beatles. It's not any of those guys. Certainly not the modern groups. It was a Grateful Dead. Band leader, Jerry Garcia, one of the most brilliant business people I've ever followed. In fact, as a matter of fact, anybody interested in, go buy the marketing lessons from the Grateful Dead and you will have a good time. Okay, what he said was, you don't want merely to be the best of the best. You want to be the only one who does what you do. And I discovered that after I created the only statement. So when I read this, Salim, I just went crazy, right? Here's a guy in non-social media times, way back when, that had it figured out. So that statement, the reason I'm telling you this, is that statement drove everything the Grateful Dead did for their fans. That's the mold. That's the mold that I try and get people to. Okay, with that kind of understanding. I mean, they held tailgate parties. They created a stand for people to come in and record their music at a time when people didn't want you to record their music because of patent rights. But they figured out it's sharing. And if you share, guess what happens? You sell more records. And so they focus more on the experience. And so for CPAs, I think that's a major learning point for you guys, right? It's not about the tax form. People expect you to do that accurately. Give them something they don't expect and be the only ones that does that. Okay. And then you will find gold in there. Think about yourself in the service business. You're not in a sales business. You're not in a product business. You're in the service experience business, and use that angle as a way to create your only statement. And when you do that, then you end up with a following statement. Salim, it goes, and here's your strategic plan based on these 3 questions. We will grow top line revenue to $2 million in 24 months. We will allocate our scarce resources to blah, 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 blah. That's who to serve. And we will compete and win by being the only ones who blah, 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 blah. Bang, 3 lines. There's your strategy. And then what we do is we break that down into detailed objectives in terms of time frames, who's going to do what, by when. And this is where we get back to what you said earlier. How many clients? What are we going to do? What are we going to do with the existing ones? What's our loyalty strategy? How are we going to build relationships? How are we going to measure that? That's where the detail comes. And all of a sudden, it starts happening. That's the beauty of the process. At least it worked for me, and I guarantee it will work for you.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it, man. And of course, your enthusiasm, I mean, that in itself is like amazing, right? But just, I mean, the gems you've shared with us, it's solid stuff. Well, good, man. I mean, our time's like, we can go on for a few hours, Roy. I know you can, you're a man full of energy. But let's perhaps, kind of, wrap up in a minute or so. I definitely want to ask you, how can listeners reach out to you? What's what's the way there? So I've got that question. And perhaps parting words or words of wisdom. You've shared lots of them, but anything you haven't shared, would love to, kind of 30 seconds or less, kind of give us a high level. Perhaps it's going different and, back to that. But anything you want to share in terms of stuff you haven't shared, words of wisdom, and then how can folks reach out to you?
Well, I think the essence of my message, okay, to people is get away from the world of copying. Get away from benchmarking. Benchmarking is a tool for people who want to stay in the herd. If you want to be successful, you need to get out of the herd. You need to get noticed. You need to be special. You need to be able to declare your uniqueness using the only statement. So if you do nothing else other than focus on that, that will get you a long ways ahead. Okay, because nobody else is doing it. Look at business. I'll be harsh with you. Business is mediocre because they rely on products, they rely on copying, they rely on claptrap ways to answer the question, why should you do business with me? And it's unfair to your clients. But if you tell them that you're the only one that does something that they care about, you got them. So focus on that. Look, it's easy to contact me. My website is bedifferentorbedead.com. So please come visit. I'd love to have you in my patch. I blog every week. And I've been blogging since 2009 about this stuff. So there is a ton of content on there. Come in and read about cut the crap, read about killing dumb rules, read about hiring for goosebumps, read about line of sight leadership, learn how to create your only statement. The last thing I will say to you, I have an email address. It's roy.osing@gmail.com. And I'm happy to connect with individuals on this. You would not believe that particularly since I've been doing the shows and following the one that you and I did, I've made the offer and people come to me, send me an email. Roy, here's my only statement. What do you think? Okay, that's awesome. And that creates a dialogue, and it gets their work a little closer to what the intention was, and they get value out of it. And so, I'm happy to do a one-on-one with people. I really am. Take advantage of me. I'm here to be taken advantage of.
Man, I am so appreciative, Roy, for everything you shared. This was amazing. Lots of content, good stuff. And the good thing is it's coming from a place of you've used it in your own career. You've used it. It's practical, proven stuff. It's just not, as you and I shared in the chat before this, before we started the interview, it's not theory, right? It's stuff you've used it. So it's really coming from that place. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Roy. I appreciate you, man.
You're very welcome, and hope to talk to you again.
Bye-bye.